Tonight, when you fall asleep, something extraordinary will happen inside your brain. Neurons will fire in patterns that create an entire world. You will move through that world, encounter people, feel emotions, make decisions, and experience events as completely real, all while lying completely still. And then you will wake up and within minutes, most of it will dissolve. Gone, as if it never happened. This experience is so ordinary to you that you almost never stop to think about how strange it is, how impossible it would seem to someone who had never experienced it, how completely without explanation it was for virtually the entire span of human history. Your ancestors dreamed. Every human who has ever lived dreamed. The Neanderthals, whose brains were structured enough like yours to suggest similar sleep cycles, likely dreamed. The earliest Homo sapiens on the African savanna dreamed. And for nearly all of that time, the dream was not a curiosity or a distraction. It was one of the most important and consequential experiences a human being could have. What ancient humans actually did with their dreams is one of the most revealing windows into how our species understood itself, how it made sense of a world without scientific tools, and how the interior life, the private world of night visions and symbolic imagery, became woven into the fabric of every culture that has ever existed. To understand this, you need to start somewhere most people don't expect. Not with mythology, not with ancient texts, with the structure of the brain itself. The human brain during REM sleep, the sleep stage most associated with vivid dreaming, undergoes a distinctive pattern of activity. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with logical reasoning, critical evaluation, and the sense of self as separate from experience, goes quiet. The limbic system, which governs emotion, memory, and threat response, becomes highly active. The visual cortex fires intensely, even in the absence of external light. The result is a state in which emotional experience is heightened, critical judgment is suppressed, and imagery is processed as real. This neurological picture is important because it explains something that puzzled researchers for a long time: why dream experiences feel so much more real than they are, and why the emotional content of dreams is so often far more intense than anything in waking life. Now imagine experiencing this state with no framework to explain it, no understanding of neurons, sleep stages, or brain anatomy. You lose consciousness every night. Another world opens up. People who are dead appear to you and speak. You fly, fall, run from creatures, receive warnings, find yourself in places you have never been. The emotional intensity is overwhelming, and when you wake, it was real. It felt exactly as real as waking life. More real sometimes. What would you do with that experience? For your ancestors, the answer was almost universal across cultures and across time. You would treat it as information, not as random neural noise, not as the byproduct of memory consolidation, as a message, a visit, a window into a reality that was normally invisible to waking eyes. Across virtually every documented traditional culture on Earth, from the indigenous peoples of Australia and the Americas to the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, from the early Greeks to the peoples of sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, dreams were understood to be a portal, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead, between the human and the divine, between the present and the future, became permeable. This was not naivety. This was not primitive superstition. It was a rational response to a genuinely inexplicable experience. When a person loses consciousness and enters a state that is indistinguishable from waking reality, in which they encounter the dead and receive information they could not have known while awake, the hypothesis that something real and important is happening is not an unreasonable one. The Mesopotamian dream tradition, one of the oldest for which we have written records, treated dreams with elaborate seriousness. The ancient Sumerians and Babylonians maintained professional dream interpreters, a recognized role in society whose function was to decode the symbolic language in which the gods were believed to speak. Dreams were recorded on clay tablets. Specific symbols were catalogued and their meanings archived. The Babylonian Dream Book, one of the oldest surviving interpretive texts in human history, contains hundreds of dream images with their corresponding meanings, reflecting a systematic attempt to map the language of the divine. What is striking about these ancient interpretive systems is not how wrong they were, but how sophisticated. The Mesopotamian tradition understood that dream content was symbolic rather than literal, that a dream about water didn't mean you would encounter water, but something the water represented. They understood that the dreamer's emotional state within the dream was as important as the imagery. They understood that recurring dreams carried particular weight. These are not primitive intuitions. They are observations about dream phenomenology that modern sleep researchers have independently confirmed as accurate. In ancient Egypt, dreams occupied a similarly central position in public and private life. The Egyptians believed that during sleep, the soul, the ka or the ba, depending on the tradition, could leave the body and travel to other realms, bringing back information, warnings, and communications from the dead. Temples called Serapeum were built specifically for the practice of dream incubation, in which a petitioner would sleep within the sacred precinct hoping to receive a dream from a specific deity, typically Serapis, who was believed to speak directly to sleepers. This practice of deliberate dreaming, of going to a specific place and using ritual preparation to invite a particular kind of dream, is one of the most widespread ritual practices in human history. It appears in ancient Greece, where the healing deity Asclepius was believed to appear in the dreams of petitioners who slept in his temples, called Asclepia. The sick traveled hundreds of miles to sleep in these sacred spaces, prepared themselves through fasting, prayer, and ritual bathing, and then lay down to receive the healing vision that would tell them what they needed to know about their illness. The Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote extensively about dreams in 3 separate treatises: on dreams, on divination in sleep, and on sleep and waking. His analysis was remarkably modern in some ways. He noted that dreams often involve the exaggeration of minor physical sensations, that a person with a slight fever might dream of fire, that a person with a full bladder might dream of water. He was skeptical of the divine origin of all dreams, but he also acknowledged that some dreams appeared to carry information that couldn't be easily explained, and he took that puzzle seriously rather than dismissing it. Across the ancient Mediterranean world, the interpretation of dreams was a serious intellectual discipline. The 2nd century writer Artemidorus of Daldis produced a 5-volume work called the Oneirocritica, the interpretation of dreams, that synthesized dream interpretation traditions from across the ancient world and which influenced dream theory for over 1,000 years. Artemidorus explicitly distinguished between what he called enhypnia, ordinary dreams reflecting the dreamer's waking concerns, and oneiroi, meaningful predictive dreams that carried real information. This distinction between signal and noise, between the dreams worth attending to and the dreams that are simply processing the day's residue, is one that appears in virtually every ancient tradition. The indigenous traditions of the Americas developed some of the most elaborate and consequential dream cultures in human history. For many nations of the northeastern woodlands, including the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, dreaming was understood as the language of the soul's deepest desires. The Iroquois concept of Ondinonk referred to the hidden wish of the soul expressed in dreams, and this concept created a social obligation. The community was bound to help the dreamer fulfill what their dream indicated their soul required. This was not a metaphor. Dreams were acted upon. If a person dreamed of a feast, the community held a feast. If a person dreamed of a particular object, the community obtained that object for them. The midwinter ceremony, one of the most important ritual events in Haudenosaunee culture, included a period of several days during which community members moved from house to house acting out their dreams and receiving help interpreting and fulfilling them. This was a social institution built around the understanding that the dream expressed something real about the self that waking life could not. The Aboriginal Australian tradition of the dreaming, tjukurpa in the Anangu language, represents perhaps the most sophisticated integration of dream reality and waking reality in any culture ever studied. The dreaming is not a historical period, not a mythological past, but an ongoing dimension of reality that exists alongside and interpenetrating the physical world. Sacred sites in the landscape are understood as points where the dreaming breaks through into the physical. Songlines are routes through the landscape that encode the movements of ancestral beings who continue to exist in the dreaming. Individual human beings participate in the dreaming through sleep, ritual, and ceremony, and their dreams are understood as direct contact with this ongoing ancestral reality. Anthropologists who have worked closely with Aboriginal communities consistently note that the distinction between dream and waking that seems fundamental and obvious to Western observers is not fundamental in Aboriginal understanding. The dream is not less real than waking experience. It is differently real. Accessing it requires different tools, but it carries the same ontological status. The ancient Chinese tradition developed a sophisticated classification system for dreams that distinguished between 6 different types based on their origin and character, including positive dreams, negative dreams, dreams of thought, dreams of waking, dreams of joy, and dreams of fear. Official dream interpreters were part of the imperial court. Dreams of emperors were treated as matters of state, and the tradition of using dream imagery as a diagnostic tool in Chinese medicine, understanding certain dream patterns as indicating imbalances in specific organ systems, persisted for thousands of years and continues to influence traditional Chinese medicine today. In almost every ancient tradition, there was a recognition of something that modern sleep science has now confirmed: that dreams are not random. The content of dreams is systematically related to the dreamer's emotional state, their waking concerns, their unresolved fears and desires, their physical health. Ancient traditions read this connection as evidence that dreams carried meaningful information about the dreamer's relationship with the world, the gods, or the dead. Modern science reads the same connection as evidence that dreams play a role in emotional processing and memory consolidation. These two readings are not as incompatible as they first appear. The modern neuroscience of dreaming is still far from a complete account of what dreams are for. We know that REM sleep is associated with emotional memory processing. We know that dreaming appears to help the brain make connections between disparate memories and experiences. We know that dream deprivation has significant psychological consequences, but we don't know why the experience of dreaming feels like a coherent narrative rather than random imagery. We don't know why certain emotional experiences seem to recur across dreaming minds separated by thousands of years and cultures. We don't have a complete explanation for why the dreaming brain produces the specific content it produces. The ancient traditions were not explaining what we now explain with neuroscience. They were addressing something the neuroscience hasn't yet reached: the meaning of the experience. What you are supposed to do with the information, how the night's visions should be integrated into the life being lived by day. And here is what is perhaps most striking about all of this: the practice of attending carefully to dreams, of treating them as meaningful messages from some deeper layer of the self rather than dismissing them as neural noise, appears to produce genuine psychological benefits. Carl Jung, who developed the most influential modern framework for dream interpretation, argued that dreams express the language of the unconscious, and that attending to them creates a conversation between the conscious and unconscious mind that is deeply valuable for psychological health. Whether or not his specific theoretical framework was correct, the practice he advocated, taking dreams seriously and attending to their symbolic content as information about inner life, is supported by significant empirical evidence for improved self-understanding and emotional processing. Your ancestors built temples for dreaming. They employed specialists to interpret the night's visions. They organized community ceremonies around the acting out of dreams. They mapped the landscape of the dream world as carefully as they mapped the landscape of the waking one. They understood something that the modern world has largely forgotten. The mind does not stop working when you fall asleep. It goes somewhere. And what it brings back, if you are willing to pay attention, may be some of the most important information you will ever receive about who you actually are and what you actually need. Tonight, before you reach for your phone and scroll away the remnants of what you dreamed, try something your ancestors would have considered the most natural thing in the world. Lie still for a moment. Let the images settle. Ask yourself what they were about. You might be surprised what the night has been trying to tell you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you find this video interesting, please consider subscribing for more content like this.